Chris Graham here. We're going to talk some UVA basketball, a little bit of Virginia Tech basketball, and maybe some UVA football here on the show. Recording this on Tuesday afternoon. We're still a few hours away from tonight's tip, UVA and NC State, 9 o'clock start over at JPJ. I talked about this on the pod yesterday. I did some research finally, got a little column on the economics of 9 p.m. tips. It's because of TV. That was a given, but I did some research. According to the college athletics database, which is a really fun site to get into if you're a math nerd like me, 28.3% of college revenues come from media rights. That's TV. It's by far the single biggest line item on the revenue side for college athletics. This is aggregate, not just UVA specific, but everybody. 16.5% comes from ticket sales. So it's almost 2 to 1. It's close to 2 to 1 from TV to ticket sales. And so 9 o'clock tips, how do they make sense? Well, if you're in an athletics director's office, you say the people buying the tickets are going to come no matter what time we put them out there. I mean, reasonably, we're not going to do it 2 in the morning. That money's a given. It's fixed. It's there. It's already in the bank. The TV money, we need to, work on that. That's where we can make more money. So it's not quite to the point. I think I said this yesterday. You're paying money to be part of the background of the TV show, but it's close to that. It's clear that if they're going to bend over backwards, though, they're going to go bend over backwards for TV. That's why we had a noon tip. What was it? The Boston College game, wasn't it? I think it was a Saturday game, a noon tip, which is too early for basketball, unless you're in a tournament situation. And then the 9 o'clock tip. This is the fourth 9 p.m. tip, weeknight 9 p.m. tip for UVA basketball this season. It'll probably be the final. There's only one more game. It's a road game, too, that doesn't have a set time, a TBA decided on the schedule. All the other games have a time. So no more of these this season for Virginia fans, at least at home. I don't think I saw any on the road either necessarily. Now, there could be a 9 p.m. tip in the ACC tournament if Virginia gets far enough. That means you're playing probably Friday night. And actually, Virginia, if you're the 2 or 3 seed, you'd be playing 9 o'clock. And I talked about how it's hard to, if you're going to the game, it's hard. If you're even watching on TV, it's hard to stay up for a 9 o'clock game for a lot of people. If you got work the next morning, a lot of folks I know have a much earlier get up than I do. I'm a late night guy. The frustrating thing is that this game tonight is on the ACC network, which hardly anybody watches. You can just tell that. A little pro tip for you here. Look at the quality of the commercials to see how many people are watching, because ACC network, I wrote to the ACC folks. It's been a year maybe, to ask why I couldn't find Nielsen ratings for the ACC network, and it's not just the ACC network. Actually, the other like the SEC and the Big Ten networks don't have Nielsen ratings for them either. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you sell ads if you don't have numbers to give to people. They probably have. Obviously, they have the numbers to give to the advertisers, but we, the public, can't know how many people are watching. But you can tell by looking at the quality of the commercials again, they're not good commercials. There's 3-minute timeouts where there's a couple of house ads. Anything that's a ESPN ad or an ad for the next game as a house ad, they're not getting any money for those. Then you get those little infomercial type ad. You get the ads for all those companies that are going to go out of business, they claim soon. They're not paying a lot of money for those ads. So we're staying up late tonight so that the ACC network can have something at 9 o'clock to broadcast that hardly anybody's watching. And this will make you feel even better. There's 3 ACC games on the schedule tonight. We're the 9 o'clock game. There's 3 ACC games tomorrow night on the schedule. They're all at 7 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, the ACC network reverts back to its other programming that nobody watches, the little fill-in programs that, again, nobody watches. So I don't know how this works. I don't know how the ACC network actually makes money. It's supposed to be the thing that gets us on an even footing or more even footing with SEC network, Big Ten network, which, those conferences make so much more money than the ACC. The ACC network, it was just way too late launched. And the TV industry is obviously changing too. The way people watch TV is changing. So lots of things working against us there. Bottom line, we're staying up late tonight, and it's not going to make anybody any extra money. It's just going to keep us up later and to keep us either, for those of us who have to work tomorrow morning early and be at work tomorrow morning early, even if you're watching on TV, you can thank the lack of money from the ACC network for that. If you are calling in sick or taking a personal day or at least a personal half day, That's also the case there. So, I got a couple quick things to go into with the UVA game tonight. I wrote a column last night. I know a lot of folks have commented on it, mostly on the Facebook page, where I suggested Caden Shedrick. I'm thinking he needs to start again. The 6'11" center who started 14 games for Virginia this season. If not start, at least get off the bench. He didn't play in the Virginia Tech loss. The frustrating thing, if you're a Caden Shedrick fan, and I count myself as that, I've written a couple columns about Shedrick and how he does things differently on the floor than other guys can do. On January 10th, that was the day of the Carolina game. I think that was a 9 o'clock tip, if I remember correctly. He was leading the ACC in box plus minus, defensive box plus minus, defensive rating. He was second in block percentage, fourth in player efficiency rating. These are all good things. He lost his starting job that night when Tony Bennett went to Ben Vanderplas at the 5 to try to shake things up. Virginia's offense was stagnating in that game, though. I think Carolina led by 6 or 7 early in the second half. From the time that Bennett went to Ben Vanderplas at the 5 with a small ball lineup, basically 4 guards around Vanderplas, Virginia outscored Carolina by 13 the rest of the way. So, yeah, it was a 6-point deficit because Virginia won by 7. And thereafter, since that game, Vanderplas has been a fixture in the starting lineup, and Shedrick has played 38 minutes over the last 6 games. The thing is, and I talked about this at length on the podcast yesterday, so I won't necessarily go too much into the rehash here, but the offense has started to come back to earth the last couple of games. The defense is struggling a bit. Ben Vanderplas, who one-on-one is a pretty solid defender, season-long numbers at least, since he's had to start guarding the 5s in the ACC, he's started to struggle a bit, and Tony Bennett's having to send double teams over to help him out. When the big in question is a good passer out of those double teams, that's when things get to be in trouble. Syracuse, if they had knocked down some shots, would have won that game last week. Virginia won 67-62 up in the Dome. Syracuse only 3 of 15 from 3 in that one. And what Virginia Tech was able to do, 7 of 18 from 3, which is modestly better. I mean, it's better. It's 38% But also the Hokies were not just content to pass out of double teams and settle for 3-point shots, actually attacked the rim a good bit out of those double teams. And Justin Mutz had 8 assists. So he's kicking out to some 3-point shooters out of those double teams. He was also finding cutters to the basket. Those kind of situations could be where a Caden Shedrick, who's a elite shot blocker, could be a big help to Virginia defensively. And Vanderplas in that game on Saturday, 0 points in 29 minutes. If he's going to give you 0 points offensively and then be a liability defensively, makes you think that there's maybe some kind of change coming on. Whether it's Shedrick starting, Shedrick coming off the bench and getting 20 minutes, you're going to need to see more than 0 minutes of Shedrick for this team going forward, I think, to see Virginia have some chance at success and really good success, the kind of success that I think a lot of us think that this team with the talent that it has could possibly bring. So let's talk about NC State in specific. I briefly alluded to just knowing NC State, the way they play under Kevin Keatts and have played the last several years, that this team is a team that it can give Virginia fits and has given Virginia fits because Keatts has his roster full of guys who can cut to the basket, drive to the basket, dribble drive to the basket, and create sort of one-on-one, which is an antidote to Virginia's pack line defense. Virginia's pack line defense is there to stop the post passes, the post entries. The double teams are supposed to make it hard for the post guy, a big, back to the basket post guy to be effective. Also, the doubles on the pick and rolls, the hard hedging, as the terminology goes in the pack line terminology, gets the ball out of a point guard's hands or a guard's hands out on the perimeter and takes some time off the shot clock. And kind of puts teams on the defensive as far as that goes when they're on the offensive side. NC State doesn't use a lot of that action. What you see out of these guys, they only 46.5% of their baskets are assisted. Just for comparison, Virginia, 67.5% of their baskets are assisted. That's third in the country. NC State is near 300, 295 out of 363 in the country of their baskets are assisted. That shows they rely a lot on their guys to create for themselves, not even necessarily create for their teammates. The big names, and this is a really a light rotation, a small rotation. You'll see 6 or 7 guys, the 5 starters, and one or two guys off the bench for this team. Terquavion Smith is the name you're most familiar with. He came back for his sophomore season. A lot of folks thought he could have been a late first-round pick, decided to come back and try to make it a guarantee that he'd be more of a middle first-round pick, so he'd be a guaranteed first-round pick. 18.5 points a game, high usage, 16 field goal attempts per game. Now, he does average 4.6 assists, and there's Jarkel Joyner, the 6'1" point guard, 3.2 assists per game. For the most part, those are your assists. These two guys. But Smith has high usage, 37.9% from the field, 34.7% from three. He'll get to the line, but he'll also miss a lot of shots. And so, he can carry a team if he's hot. He can also bury his own team if he's not. Joyner is the second leading scorer on this team, the 6'1" guard, 16.2 points a game, 43% from the field, 35% from three. So a little more effective, a little more efficient on the offensive end. A name you might be familiar with, you of course are if you're a Virginia fan, Casey Morsell. Finally, in his second season at NC State, 4th season overall after 2 seasons at Virginia, finally playing up to that potential he had all those years ago. Virginia fans remember him. They would have been 6 years ago now when he was being recruited out of the D.C. area, and he was a 4-star recruit, one of the top guys in the D.C. Really competitive D.C. basketball scene. Struggled for 2 years at Virginia. Struggled last year at NC State, but now he's averaging 12.6 points a game, and he's finally shooting like you knew he could shoot. 48.6% from the field, 43.9% from three. He will hit a couple threes on us tonight at least that will say, why couldn't he have done that when he was here? But Morsell is definitely a guy for this team. And then 6'9", 275-pound center DJ Burns. This will be an interesting matchup for Virginia. I'll talk about this in a second. First, his numbers: 12.1 points a game. Doesn't rebound a lot in the fours. 55.5% from the field. So offensively, he's an interesting guy. Now, 6'9", 275. There's not a lot of guys anywhere outside of the NBA, and not even a lot of NBA guys who can match up physically with just what he can present in terms of his strength in the post. That's the size of a Zion Williamson type guy. So I don't know that Vanderplas or Shedrick necessarily is the answer either way. Straight up one-on-one. Shedrick at 6'11" is probably about 230, and that's probably pushing it. Vanderplas 6'8", about 235, a little stouter just because he's a few inches shorter. But both those guys one-on-one can tend to get overpowered by a guy this size. You're going to need to see some double teams out of there. You might see some foul situation out of the 5 spot too. So you might see Shedrick and Cafaro just by default in this game, even if Ben Vanderplas gets a start at the 5. The rest of so those 5 guys, and then actually those 4 guys, because at the 5 spot they're really missing Jack Clark, 6'8" forward, putting up good numbers, but he's been out since December 30th, and he's likely still out for this one. But I'll give you his numbers. He's a guy that rebounds. He's a leading rebounder, 7.3 rebounds a game, 9.1 points a game. And his place, because he's been out all this time, you've seen Kevin Keats go to a mixture of guys, a couple of guys, Greg Gant and Ernest Ross. They're both 6'8", 6'9" guys. Don't produce a lot, and that's the weak spot. If they had Gant, I didn't get to watch this team a lot in the November, December part of their schedule, but I imagine that with him in there doing what he does, kind of would take some pressure off of DJ Burns. That would allow Burns to focus more on the offensive end. So Clark being out is definitely. They're still winning games. They're 9-4 in the ACC, this state team, but I imagine they'd be even better if they had this Clark kid. So. What can you expect from NC State offensively? I mentioned, just generally speaking, overview, a lot of one-on-ones. When you look at, I looked at Synergy Sports, which provides a breakdown of what type of plays they run, how effective they are at those types of plays. Transition, 18% of their offense comes from transition, and they shoot 56.5% effective field goal percentage. That factors in threes, that factors in free throws in addition to the field goal percentage, the actual field goal percentage. You're not going to see a lot of transition, obviously, in this game out of NC State, playing against Virginia. But that could be an issue for NC State to have to overcome. They average 69.5 possessions a game. Virginia averages 62. This game will be played much closer to Virginia's 62 than it will be to the NC State's near 70 possessions per game. It's not going to be played at that pace unless we play 2 overtimes. We won't see 70 possessions in this game for each team. So State will get fewer baskets in transition than they're used to. That can be an issue for State in this game. Spot ups, everybody's got spot ups. That's when you kick it out to a guy. They're 51.8% on spot ups, something like 33% actual field goal percentage. So that, the 3-point shots are falling for this team at a decent level. Pick and roll ball handler. This is where they do get 14% of their offense is pick and roll ball handler. They don't do so well in the pick and roll man. Basically, the pick and roll man is like 4% of their offense. When they run pick and rolls, not to have the man dive to the basket. That's the diversion. They run their pick and rolls to free up Terquavion Smith and Jarkel Joyner. Not as much Morcell. He's a spot up guy. But their guards are that's the focal point, is to free up their guards. And they shoot decently on those. 46.7% effective field goal percentage. It's less than 50%, so it could be better. Post-ups. This is where the big guy, the 6'9", 275 guy, DJ Burns, is a factor. You don't see this number very often. 57.7% effective field goal percentage on post-ups, and also on cuts, 66.4%. What synergy terms cuts are those, basically backdoor cuts in the post, in the lane from your big guys. So they're very good in the post game, both in post-ups and cuts. And then you see the pick and roll ball handler situation for them. So it's kind of, as I said yesterday, without going into that detail, kind of where they are. They're a team that this style of play is designed to give Virginia fits, or at least works well to give Virginia fits. Macro kind of situation, looking at the Ken Palm numbers. I mentioned the assisted baskets. Just looking at ACC play, these two teams match up pretty well in terms of their efficiency numbers. NC State is fourth in the in ACC games in adjusted offense. Virginia's third, and they're very close to each other in terms of their productive output. And then defensively, Virginia's a little better. Actually, Virginia's a good little bit better. Third in points per possession versus NC State sixth, and that's where the discrepancy between these two teams is a few points a game in a 60 possession game. It'll be 3 or 4 points just because Virginia's better defensively. And I mentioned the tempo numbers. It's going to play to Virginia's style. It always plays to Virginia's style. That's just the way it works. So that one's at 9:00. I had a suggestion from a reader/listener to revive the post game podcast. So we're going to do that tonight. I usually sit at courtside and write a post game story. I can work on that anytime. So I'll work on the post game podcast tonight. It'll be a quick one, 10 or 15 minutes, but we'll do this, and we'll do something like this, and we'll see if folks can get some value out of that. So we'll have that posted. Let's see, the game likely ends around 11, right? So if I get that posted by about 11:15, 11:20, I'll look for that if you could. I would do it on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, but and maybe I'll experiment with that. See if I can get it on YouTube Live. We'll see if we can work on that. In any case, I think I might just be more comfortable doing it, recording it and then posting it in full. So we'll play around with that. Anyway, so that's what we'll do tonight. Of course, after the game tonight, we'll have then our regular post game recap. Our what did we just see? Which, gosh, I'm so blessed that that's taken off. The 5 observations columns that I've been writing get lots of reads, and I'm very blessed that that's the case. So thank you for clicking on those stories. I really appreciate it. I should do a quick preview of the Virginia Tech game just because here on the podcast, just because I spent some time writing it. Virginia Tech tomorrow night plays Boston College, ACC Network, 7:00 tip. Unfair. Boston College at Virginia Tech. These two teams played early in the season. Back when Virginia Tech was 11-1 in the top 25, if you remember. And Tech lost this one up there in Chestnut Hill, 70-65, and not only lost the game, but then Hunter Couture injured his elbow. I've read that there was a break in there. I'm not sure if it was the elbow itself or a bone around the elbow, but he missed 4 games. Tech lost the Boston College game, then those 4 games, part of a stretch where they went 2-8. And that's what knocked Tech from being a top 25 team all the way down to being way on the other side of the NCAA tournament bubble. Now, the win over Virginia is part of a 3 wins in 4 game stretch, and includes also a win over Duke at home. And so the Hokies are back on track. And these two teams will play at 7:00 tomorrow night. The first one, Tech was at full strength, so there's no excuse there. They didn't lose. Couture played 30 minutes in the game. So, he had 5 points, didn't have a very big game, but Tech had to rally from 9 down in regulation, final 4:19 of regulation to force overtime. They were down 57-48 with 4:19 to go. Came back, tied the game at 59. Actually had the last shot. Darius Maddox missed the last shot. Could have won the game in regulation, and then shot 3 of 10 in the overtime. Boston College pulled out the win. Sean Padula had 18 points. Justin Mutz, 18 points in that one for the Hokies. Makai Ashton Langford, 21 for Boston College, also 18 from Devin McLaughlin. And it's funny going into this game. I mean, Virginia Tech's a big favorite when you look at the projections. I don't look at Vegas. I look at the computers and what they say. The computers have Tech a 13, anywhere from 13 to 16 points favored in this game. But Boston College is ahead of Virginia Tech in the standings, 5-8, Tech's 4-8. And I want to say it's deceptive because 2 of those wins over Notre Dame and one's over Louisville, but then one is head-to-head over Virginia Tech, and then the other's over Clemson, who currently is still in first place in the ACC overall. So, yeah, I think you want to look at this game and say it's just Boston College, but this Boston College team only won 1 game in the ACC on the road, but it could be a matchup. So, see how that goes for the Hokies. Let's see. Last thing I'll jump into. I just want to highlight, I'm not going to go into great detail, but I'll talk about the fact that, and a lot of folks have commented on this, quite a few, dozens of people have commented on this story about UVA football. Tony Elliott, I sat down just to give you the backstory, I guess, on this column I wrote. The headline is, by the way, Carla Williams wanted a tear down. She and Tony Elliott need to be made to own it. I started the column because I was going to write a story wrapped around Tony Elliott's comments, basically saying Marcus Hagans, who's leaving as wide receivers coach, the UVA alum who was at UVA as a coach for 12 years, he's leaving to go to Penn State. So Tony was thanking him and wishing him well in his future endeavors. He was also and this is at last week's press conference he did on signing day. No additional signees on signing day, but he still did a press conference. He wished Brennan Armstrong, who's going to NC State, well in his future endeavors, thanked him for his service. And then Nick Jackson, who at the time last Wednesday when Tony was talking to the media, there was still an outside shot that he might stay at Virginia. He's now, we know, he's moved on to he's not moved on to anywhere specific. He just has made it clear he's not come back to Charlottesville. Tony was wishing him well in his future endeavors. I was kind of writing about that, and I started thinking, those guys, Hagan's sort of he's a holdover on the coaching staff. He coached under Mike London, coached under Bronco Mendenhall, 1 year under Tony Elliott. Having him gone, it's now totally Tony Elliott's staff in terms of, no holdovers, because Garrett Touge, offensive line coach that he inherited from Bronco Mendenhall's staff, is also gone. He's down at NC State now with Brennan Armstrong and also Robert Anai, the former offensive coordinator under Bronco Mendenhall. So there's no more coaches left over. Well, maybe Clint Sinham's still around. I'm not sure if Sinham is still around. I just don't know. I can't remember if he was on his staff under Bronco or not. I have to look that up. But not with the longevity, certainly, that Marcus Hagan. And then you lose the quarterback of your offense, certainly the quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, and then the quarterback of your defense, middle linebacker, Nick Jackson. The teardown's complete. And that's what registered with me as I was getting ready to write a story that was going to be a nice story about him wishing those guys well in their future endeavors. Sort of made me realize he came in telling us December of 2021 he was going to rebuild the culture, which at the time stuck out because the culture didn't seem to need to be rebuilt. Bronco Mendenhall had inherited a program that had put up losing seasons in 7 of its last 8 years before he took over, went on to a 2-10 season in year 1 under him. So 8 losing seasons in 9 years. By 2019, year 4 of his tenure, Virginia was in the Orange Bowl. Virginia had never played in an Orange Bowl before. And so the last 2 seasons were 5-5 in the COVID year 2020, and then 6-6 in 2021. But to say that you needed to rebuild the culture, a bit of a stretch to say the least. But when you start thinking through things, you realize he didn't come in and tell Carla Williams he was going to do something different, and then when he got the job, then told the world, "I'm going to rebuild the culture." He got the job. You have to know this. Carla Williams had to say, "I need you to rebuild the culture." She didn't hire Bronco Mendenhall, remember. She came on after Bronco. He'd been there for a year. In fact, yeah, I remember we were sitting in the press box at the Military Bowl in 2017, the first bowl Virginia had been to in quite a few years. Carla was still relatively new, sitting up in the press box up there with us. And so, yeah, she inherited Bronco, and this is her guy. Tony Elliott's her guy. So they wanted to rebuild things, even though they didn't need to be rebuilt. To rebuild, you tear down. They tore down. I tell you what, if you're tearing down something, they did a great job tearing down what Bronco had built. Last year's 3-7 record is an excellent teardown. That's among the best teardowns I've ever seen. It's also among the worst teardowns I've ever seen, because Virginia, the fact that Elliott dawdled on hiring a new offensive coordinator, eventually in early January, naming Des Kitchings to that job, is why the offensive line left en masse in December of 2021. One of those guys, Victor Oluwatimi, ends up being the Outland Trophy winner, just to talk about the quality of the offensive line guys they lost. That's a big reason why the offense last year was awful. Went from 515 yards per game of offense in 2021 to 368 yards of offense per game last year. The defense, I mean, he hired a great defensive coordinator, John Ruzinski from Air Force, turned things around greatly on the defensive side of the ball. And looking back, if Carla Williams had just told, and she did, she told Bronco Mendenhall, you need to replace your defensive coordinator. If Bronco had said, yes, I'll replace my defensive coordinator, I'll bring John Ruzinski in, Virginia's not 3-7 last year. They're probably 8-2 or 9-1 with that offense. If they keep the offensive line, keep running in place, get a new defensive coordinator, get that, because Ruzinski turned this basically the same guys in 2021 who couldn't tackle anybody into a force last year. Okay. So that's why things are where they are. You couldn't keep the band together, and the team was 3-7 before what happened on November 13th, the tragedies, and so now the teardown's complete. You got the heart and soul of your offense, heart and soul of your defense, heart and soul of your coaching staff are out the door. This is totally Tony's team, and it's totally Carla Williams' situation. So now, the reason for my lack of optimism looking forward, it's not because of anything. Tony Elliott seems like a stand-up guy. Probably, we'll write a story about this later in the week. He had some comments at his presser last week about the lessons he learned in year one, and there's a lot of them. I typed up 1,500 words of notes from his comments on his lessons from year one that he learned. First-time head coach, you're going to learn on the job, and you learn a lot of things. But the biggest thing is, as far as the future, I mean, okay, so if you're going to be a developmental program, which is what UVA football needs to be, Virginia's not going to get the 5-star kids that the Alabamas, the SEC schools in general, except for Vanderbilt, go for, and a lot of them, the ones at the top get. You're not going to get the kind of players that Tony coached at Clemson when he was offensive coordinator there for 7 years. You're going to get guys that are smart kids who, some of them are really good football players and want to get a great education. Some of them are guys who are great students, good football players who can be coached into being great football players potentially. And you're going to need to develop them. You're going to need to be patient and work with them and get them built up, right? The ACC, the recruiting ranked 13th in the ACC this year. Tony's first full year with he and his staff on the trail. No excuses. This is your recruiting. You own this. 13th in the ACC out of 14 schools. Not a lot of guys that are going to be coming in that project certainly as year one starters. Maybe Cam Robinson, the linebacker, may have to, because of losing Mick Jackson. He may be pressed into a role a little sooner. He might have contended for, if not a starting role, he may have contended anyway. A borderline 4-star high school linebacker out of Virginia. He may have pressed for at least a lot of snaps, but now he's going to be playing for potentially from some starting time. But so not a lot on the recruiting trail. The transfer portal has brought in some guys. There's a Cameron Kelly. I'm doing these names from memory now. The North Carolina safety who may transition to cornerback. There's the Iowa State cornerback who put up good numbers a couple of years ago, not so good last year. They're replacing the other two best players on the defensive side, Fentrell Cypress, who's transferring out, and then Anthony Johnson, who is going to make his stab at the NFL after, and I think Johnson would have probably had 1 year of eligibility left, but he's already been in college 6 years, and he is an NFL prospect, at least a fringe NFL prospect. So I can understand him at this point, just saying it's time to move on. How many more degrees can I get, basically, right? So, but you're having to replace, 2 elite level ACC cornerbacks with guys who, at least if there's a guy from Carolina, a guy from Iowa State, they put up decent numbers. At least there's a chance at a 1-for-1 replacement. Maybe not, but it'll be close, right? But you're having to replace Nick Jackson. There's not a lot coming back at linebacker. Detailed that a lot. Talked about that a lot yesterday on the podcast. Offensive side of the ball, once again, so they had to replace the offensive line from 2021. The makeshift offensive line that they put together last year, gone. They're four starters gone. 2 to the transfer portal, 2 just giving up on football. That's how invested they were in year 1 under Tony Elliott, that they're just giving up on football with eligibility left. And so there's the offensive line is very green, very inexperienced. The room doesn't even have the number of guys that you want. Tony Elliott said back in December he wanted 15 guys in the room. There's 12 right now in the offensive line group. So they need to find some more numbers. Even the numbers they've got aren't experienced guys at this stage. So if you can't block, you're going to have trouble on the offensive side. If you can't cover on the defensive side and you can't tackle at the linebacker spot, you're going to have trouble there. We look at next year and you say the 2022 team was 3-7. The schedule is challenging next year. You start with Tennessee, you got JMU, your home opener. JMU won 8 games in their first year in FBS, and they've got that one. They got that one circled. They want to win in Charlottesville. They don't even want to just win by a lot. They want to win by a lot. Even the FCS game, William & Mary was in the playoffs this year. FCS, that one won't be easy. That one's in October. The ACC schedule is not going to be easy. NC State comes to town with Brennan Armstrong, with Robert Anae, with Garrett Touche in September on a Friday night. There's just not a lot there that makes you think, looking at the schedule, 4 wins is a stretch. 3 wins might be asking for something. 2 wins is probably where the over-under is. 2.5 wins is probably your over-under. If you're a betting person and you want to put some money down, I'd put it on the under. And looking ahead, so that's part of a teardown, right? Is year 2 is going to be tough. That happens with a lot of coaches. George Welsh in year 2 was still building the program and struggled a bit there first couple of years. And so you're getting your guys in. It takes a while to get your system in place. Year 3 is when you should start. Okay, we've had 2 recruiting classes in now. We've got a 3rd one coming in. We should start having some guys. But the recruiting the last 2 years has not been good. So what do you have? Well, let's go pluck the transfer portal. We haven't been doing a good job on the transfer portal. So year 3, all of a sudden you're 3 years in now, and next year, it's hard to imagine that year 3 makes you think of 4 wins even being realistic, much less even that lofty status of 4-8. So if he's 3 years in with 3 wins. Maybe 3 wins, maybe 4 wins. And I think I'm being optimistic the next 2 years, saying 3, 3, and 4. Even if you have that, you got 10 wins in 3 years. How many of you out there listening to this are looking forward to 3, 3, and 4 in the first 3 years, and then looking ahead? Hey, I can't wait till 2025. This is something. This is something that's going to be hard to deal with. We're already not seeing people at the games. I know the average attendance last year, announced attendance, was over 40,000 somehow. Having been in a stadium for all those games, there were not 40,000 people at those games. They might have sold tickets, they might have sold season tickets, whatever. They might be counting the kids in a certain way that come to the game, or they're counting them as coming to the games. There aren't 40,000 people there most Saturdays. That's why UVA athletics is struggling right now financially. It's going to struggle even more. When we were still a relatively winning program going into this season, we were in the Orange Bowl in 2019, put up all those numbers in offense last year. We were just a defense away from being a really good team last year. You still can't draw 40,000 to games. Where are we going to be by 2025 after 3 wins, 4 wins? I'm being optimistic saying those numbers even, but where are we going to be in 2025 in terms of season tickets and how many people show up on Saturdays? We're going to be nowhere. So This and where that bothers me is then, yeah, I've talked about basketball out here in this podcast. If football's not making the money it needs to make, that impacts men's basketball, it impacts women's basketball, it impacts baseball and softball, it impacts everything on grounds at UVA if the football team is not making the money it needs to make. So this was a ballsy move. Well, I'm being positive when I say that, by Carla Williams, to tear down the football program, starting over from scratch, and then now it's not working out. It's we're 1 year into it, and it's clearly behind the eight ball. I'm using a cliche there, obviously, but it's clearly behind the eight ball. And hey, man, I'll tell you what, I'm still going out there. I'll be going out there on Saturdays. The one Friday night, I think there's a Thursday road game. I'm still going out there hoping that the good guys in orange and blue, obviously hoping that they win the games. I will love to be wrong and see, this team wins 6 or 7 games next year. I will love for me to be way wrong about my presumptions there, and then even better in 2024. I can't wait to be proven wrong. I'm not going to be proven wrong, and realistically, we're looking at sometime probably in that 2025 season, year 4, that a move will be made. Similar, if you're looking for a blueprint, looking for how this is going to play out. Georgia Tech this past year, year 4 of Jeff Collins, wasn't working out. He started out 1-3, and at the end of September, they fired not only Jeff Collins, the school did, but also fired the AD who hired him. And that's where things are headed. September, whatever, last week of September, after the Saturday game that week, game 4 of that 2025 season, we're going to be probably getting ready to hire a new AD and head football coach. And that, I'm not looking forward to that. None of y'all are looking forward to that. We are the long timers of us anyway. Remember, kind of fleetingly now, the end of the George Welsh years, where some people amongst us couldn't stand that the bar was set that, okay, if we at least win 7 games, that's good. We need to be winning more, we said, and George kind of felt the pressure and decided to step away. What will we give now to just win at least 7 games every year, right? Been a while. Anyway, so tonight, Virginia NC State, 9 o'clock tip, late night. I'll jump on as quickly as I can afterwards, and do something post game from JPJ. And I'm thinking more and more we'll try that on YouTube Live. I've done that here before, so we'll hopefully, and the internet's good there. It'll work. But we'll do a quick recap of the game here on. We'll do it on YouTube for the people who are listening to the podcast. I'll make sure to upload it there too. It might be a little later when I upload the podcast, but you'll be asleep anyway. It's late night. It'll be ready for you in the morning. Let's just say it that way, on the podcast side. And then of course we'll have all of our post game stuff. I'll write the first 2 stories tonight. The traditional game recap type thing that I do, which is not really, I don't really do the traditional recap anymore, but my version of traditional recap, and then I'll do my observations column tomorrow. Then morning I'll wake up later and we'll have the post game, more thorough post game with comments from Tony and the 2 players they give us, and some thoughts from Kevin Keats as well. I'm sure to interject into there. And then we'll look ahead to Saturday with Duke coming to a lot to look forward to here from a UVA sports podcast perspective. Thank you for listening. If you have comment suggestions, for example, the suggestion today, Chris revived those post games. Email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.